Welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we're joined by Jeffrey Johnston, who last year lost a son, Seth, at age 23 of an overdose. He is sharing his story and his grief to help others face the challenge of addiction. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
It's quite our pleasure. This is close. It was October 4th of last year that you lost your son to a heroin overdose. Tell us a little bit about why you're here today and what's been motivating you to share this story with people.
Well, I'll be honest with you. This is not something that I'm excited to do or happy to do. I feel like it's necessary that I have to be here. I never envisioned myself at 50 years old to be going through something like this. And in a few weeks, we'll be in a 6-month anniversary. Seems like 60 years, and it seems like 6 days at the same time. So I think my trajectory of my life changed that day, and the people around me, my family. And I've always been the type of person that when something happens, I call it chaos is thrown at you, that the event itself shouldn't determine your character, it's how you deal with the event. So for me, it's a banner I have to carry the rest of my life to be, a member of that club of having a deceased child. And it's the grief itself is an addiction. That's an irony of this whole thing. Is what we're going through is the same thing my son went through, from a standpoint that it's not curable. It's a disease, and now we're left behind having to be addicted with his passing every day, and it's a humbling experience. I'll relate some stories to you, and it's definitely beyond life-changing. And my job now as a husband and a father of my other 2 children is to be the best role model I can be and not turn this into... I remember when Seth passed away, I called my dad. My dad's a retired doctor, and he's dealt with these things many times. And I said, how do I bring it to the attention of my 2 boys, Seth's brothers? And he said, tell them truth, tell it quickly, and don't talk. And so I sat him down and I told him, and I didn't say anything, which was hard for me to do. And my oldest son asked me, he goes, how'd he die? And I told him, drugs. And you could just see the fog in their face. I think they almost had a feeling that day was coming with what we went through the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of the stuff we had to have Seth in treatment and things like that. So in that moment I said, boys, we can take this moment and we can turn this into our own addiction, and our life can go backwards and can spiral out of control, and we can have a miserable life, or we can use this as a way to inspire our lives to make us become better people and to positively affect the people that are around us. So I said, I'm choosing the second route. I said, you guys can join me on this, but I'm not going to let this derail my life. And why I act that way, I don't know. That's just how I'm wired. And everybody copes with these things differently. And as I'm finding out, all of us are going to have tragedy happen. I just didn't expect to have this type of tragedy. So
how are your children coping?
My 15-year-old, like most teenagers, holds it in more. I get one-word sentences out of him. I'm lucky, and I think he was that way before Seth passed. But my 13-year-old's a little more emotional. He talks a lot more, lets his feelings out more. We had him in counseling immediately when it happened. They go to Cedar Rapids Prairie here. And I contacted the counselors, and the counselors met with him a few times and said, I don't think there's much of a need. It seems like they're coping pretty well. So I will be honest with you, when we were going through this whole experience, we didn't hide it from the kids. And I counseled a lot of my friends. I said, well, what would you do? This is before Seth died. And they said, well, it's a taboo topic and all this. I said, no. I remember when Seth was in the hospital one time, he had overdosed on alcohol. And we brought our 2 kids with us, our youngest kids, and they must have been 13 and 11 at the time. And they sat in the lobby with us. And I said, I'm going to make sure they're aware what this stuff can do to you. And I don't regret that. And every parent's going to raise their kids differently, and every parent's going to do it the way they feel best. For me, I didn't want to make it a taboo topic. I wanted to make sure we covered these things and talked about them. so my kids can come to me and not feel like I'm gonna, criticize them or think less of them.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to come back to the kids, but I also want to really talk about your son and some of the signs you saw leading up to it.
Yeah.
We'll come back. When we return, we'll ask Jeff to walk through his experience from the beginning and some of the signs he may have seen early on that might help you deal with a tragedy like this. You don't want to miss this. See you after the break.
Many teenagers don't understand the dangers and effects of marijuana use. Now it's time for Just the Facts, ma'am. An IQ is a score determined from standardized tests to determine intelligence. An IQ of 100 puts the average person in the 50th percentile of intelligence. Regular marijuana use during teenage years can cause a long-term 8-point drop in IQ. A loss of 8 IQ points drops them to the 29th percentile. For more information, go to drugfreeiowa.org.
After Kylie used coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Hi, I'm Carnell. If you're like me, you spend a lot of time online, streaming shows, downloading files, and Skyping with family. That's why Mediacom recently boosted many of our internet speeds at no extra cost. We call it Always Faster Internet because we're always improving to meet your needs. And when you combine improved speeds with hassle-free Wi-Fi, you get super fast speeds all over the house. So more gets done even faster. The power to make a good thing even better, the power to simplify.
Welcome back. We're joined by Jeff Johnston, and we're talking about the challenge he faced with his son's addiction. Jeff, let's step back a little bit and wind the story. You said that you had gone through several years of dealing with addiction and treatment. Let's wind the story back to when your son was younger and this all began, and tell us a little bit about the history leading to this event.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely was some signals and some patterns, and it probably, I have to say, around 15 years old. And that's a tough time for kids and for boys becoming men and all those issues you deal with. And, we saw little things, little lies, little deceptions, things that, I did to my parents, you did to yours, stayed out a little later than you should have. And it just kind of escalated, and they got to be 16 and 17, and his lies became bigger, and the deceptions became bigger, and the trouble he got in became bigger. And I tell my wife all the time, we had so many, I called them Dr. Phil sessions, I called them Bobby Knight sessions, I called Tough Love, we tried everything, took things away, rewarded him, and at some point, a lot of conversations I had with good friends of mine, they just said, he's, at certain ages, you're not going to have much of an influence. You get replaced by their peer group. And that's something my dad always told me too, is that, your children eventually will replace you, and it's a tough time. But unfortunately, the peer group that he picked was not a very good peer group. And, just made a lot of really decisions that I never made at that age, so I couldn't deal with them very well. And it escalated, and, the frustrating thing for me is I've always had a pretty good ability to influence things around me, control things, not in a negative way, but could positively influence people. I just couldn't get him to change his behavior. And that was what drove my passion even more to do this after the fact, because I think now I can tell my story and hope I can help people in a way I couldn't help him. You know what I'm saying?
In talking to a lot of parents that have been through grief, it's obvious that it's not a parent's fault, everything a child does. And one of the frightening corollaries to events like this is that we often liken them to experiences we had when we were young. Do you wonder if maybe now there's just more types of drugs, more things affecting them, more directions to go as the world maybe changed, so it's even harder for a parent to manage these stresses?
I'm not sure if there's more. I think the strain of some of the drugs out there today is more lethal, especially heroin. You know, with fentanyl and the stuff that they put in now is just, you know, and I can't relate to putting a needle in my arm, and I just don't, that itself would scare me, just the needle itself. I don't like needles. And so I can never relate to that part of those addictions, you know, and I can relate to other types of things that we deal with as parents and stuff, but, you know, I don't know if it's more prevalent. I think social media probably is not helping teenagers a lot today. You know, they go on there and they post things and brag and parties and things like that, and I think, you know, back in the day when we did things in high school, it was just so harmless and so innocent. At the time, it may have been not what we should have done. What our parents told us things not to do. But, you know, heroin is just something I never saw. I never saw in college. I never saw cocaine. I mean, it's a world I couldn't relate to with my son, you know, and still can't. So I can only relate to it as a grieving parent, you know, and
he overdosed on heroin. Did you
Yeah.
see other drug use patterns before it got to that?
It's like everyone told me. It's like it starts with alcohol and marijuana, and that's where it starts. And you know, I remember talking to Seth and telling him, you know, honey, this is going to escalate. You know, marijuana goes to something else that doesn't give you the same high, and then that goes to something else. And boy, it's so accurate and so correct that it starts with the little things. And even now today, the prescription pill problem is just. You know, these kids are prescribed, you know, pills to help with ADD, things like that, and they end up abusing them. And it just, whether it's that or something else, it starts with something. And I tell my two youngest boys, the easiest way to quit an addiction is never start. And it's not because you won't like the drugs, it's because you will. And that's a different approach, I think. When I was younger, my mom and dad said, don't do this because it's bad for you. Well, don't touch the stove because it's hot. What do? You know, we touch the stove. Well, I'm not going to tell my kids that it's bad for you. I think they see that with Seth dying. I don't have to tell them that. I tell them you can't stop. That's the problem. You can't, this stuff is too addictive. And when you're choosing drugs over your family, that shows you how strong it is. You know, so is there a right answer? I don't know. I mean, if I can tell my story 1,000 times and help one person, then it's worth it. But in a way, this is therapy for me too. And you know, my wife asked me today, she goes, I don't know how you can do this. And it's not that I want to do it, I have to do it, you know, for me and for anybody else I can help, you know.
Well, we talk about life in the business of substance abuse being saving one life at a time.
Right.
And that's a big step, that's a big deal. Are you raising your children slightly differently today than you were before?
What a great question.
I'll tell you what, think about it over the break.
That's a great question.
Because I think a lot of parents would like to hear the answer to
Yeah.
that. When we come back from the break, we'll be joined by substance abuse expert Aaron Foster, and we'll talk about, you know, a parental role, the role of addiction treatment, and not only the signs you need to watch out for, but what some of the interventions may be to help your children and loved ones. Stay with us. You don't want to miss this.
You may have heard about synthetic drugs in the news and the fact that more Iowa teenagers who use them are ending up in the hospital. Synthetic drugs can be dangerous, but you can help prevent the threat. Learn about synthetic drugs and talk with your kids now. For sale does not mean safe to use.
Get help at drugfreeiowa.org.
Thousands of businesses have switched to Mediacom Business for fast and reliable internet, unlimited nationwide calling, and popular TV channels with sports package upgrades. And now, with our new business mobile data, they stay connected on the go. Mediacom Business is the simple and easy way for businesses to get all their telecommunication services from one provider, all for just $99.95 a month. Get a free mobile hotspot device with all 4 services. Mediacom Business. How can we help you?
So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great. I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice. And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
We couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're joined by Erin Foster, who's going to sort of chime in with us about Jeff's experience, because the organization she works for, ASAC, was really helpful with the treatment cycle that Jeff's son participated in. Erin, tell us a little bit about ASAC, what you do,
Sure.
And then we'll circle back around to some important parenting questions that we had.
Sounds good. I work with the Area Substance Abuse Council, which is located here in Cedar Rapids. I am currently the Lynn County Director of Prevention, but really looking to reach out and discuss more treatment options and how it's okay for people to ask for help when they are in need.
Now, Jeff, you had a pretty good experience with a treatment cycle that your son went through at ASAC. But as I understand it, you had to really push to get a spot.
Yeah, the experience itself was great for Seth, and but getting him there was, you know, I had never went through this experience before. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know if I call a doctor, police. I had no idea. I just knew my son was going downhill quickly, very quickly. So I reached out to ASAC. I think someone referred me to you guys. I don't remember how I ended up calling, and I talked to whoever at the time, or still is, the head person. I haven't talked to him for a while, but I said, here's the deal. I got to get my son in. I thought it was like going to a hotel. You pull up, you give your credit card, you check in to buy, get a room for a night. I had no idea how this worked. And I think most parents watching this would say they have no idea how to just start. They know the ending product or the process, but they don't know how to get there. And she said, no, you got to like apply, or there's a bed you get. And I'm like, okay, how do I get a bed? And they said, well, they're full. And apparently now I'm finding out that's a problem, not just here, but all over the country, that a lot of these facilities are at maximum capacity because of the epidemics with addictions out there. And I literally said, if my son doesn't get in there by Monday, he's not going to make it. And boy, it was quick. ASAC called me back at work. I remember I sat down crying, called my wife. I said, I got him a bed. You know, I'd sell my soul if I have to get him a bed. I'm going to get him a bed. And I was going to go over there and drive over there and talk to somebody. And we got him a bed, and he got in there and checked in, and boy, it was like going to college for him in a way. I was so proud of him that he would go. You know, the hard part was thinking he wouldn't go. And once I said, Seth, I got you a bed, man, let's go. And he said, good, Dad. And he went, and I got a call a couple days later, and they said, well, he's having some issues adjusting. He's a little angry about some things. I think he was just going through withdrawals, you know, which is common with addicts when they get off their stuff, and they have a hard time dealing with reality. And so I went in there a lot of times, visited him, and said, Seth, it's okay, you know. And ASAC was great. They were very patient with him. They made it clear that we have rules, and if you break these rules, you won't be here. And he didn't, and ended up becoming a pretty model, I don't know what you call him, a patient there, yeah, yep. Person there. And one of the proudest days I had with Seth in my life was when he graduated.
When did he graduate?
I don't remember the date. He was in there for a couple months, and we went down there, and they had a big circle with other people that are graduating, and we got to talk, and I brought my Roman and Ian and my other two boys and my wife, and we held hands and cried, and I hugged strangers, and it was just it was a humbling moment in my life. You know, we focus so much on material things and successes and things like that, but this was a high point in my life, I'll be honest with you. And you know, I think Seth had a really good, positive experience there. Now, when he got out, ASAC couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't be there as much, and he went back to some bad habits, and here we are today. But a lot of addicts go through those programs, and they end up thriving. And I noticed the title of the show is Surviving Bad, but in a way, we got to think the way we can thrive from the bad and find some possible way to turn something good out of this stuff. It's hard to do. It takes a long time to do. But we don't have any other choice, right? You got to find positive things, and this is what I taught my two boys, is to every day try to find something positive. When something bad happens to somebody, step in and say, I've had bad things happen to me. I can relate to you, you know?
Now let's circle back to your boys and the question we had earlier.
I know I have to answer now.
Raising them, yeah, are you raising them differently? What is your, you know, how would you as a parent recommend what you've learned.
Here's
for
what I'm
people.
not doing. That's a great question. I think what I learned was not to coddle my kids. I tell them every day, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. So learn by making mistakes, by trying and learning from them, and just don't repeat them again. So I'm not trying to sequester them from reality. I'm not trying to hide them in a cave and keep them away from drugs. I tell them, you're going to run into this stuff every single day of your life. Whether it's high school, college, or when you're a professional and you're making money, you're going to run into drugs and alcohol and gambling and all these things. And you have to learn that your peer group will respect you more by saying the word no than they will by saying the word yes. And that's a powerful phrase I say to my kids all the time. But I tell them it's fine to make mistakes. It's okay. I'm not going to be that overbearing parent that you get a bad grade, you know, it's the end of the world. It's okay. I mean, I don't let them see my grades in high school, or then they would understand where I'm coming from. But you know, I think this thing's put a lot of perspective in my life, and any parent that's lost a child, you learn to listen a little bit more to other people than talk. And when now people tell me their stories, I tend to just let them talk. And I think in the back of my head, man, I've been there. I know how you feel, and hopefully I can help them.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. When we come back after the break, I'd like you both to provide some advice to our listeners on what they might be able to do to avoid these consequences. And after a short break, when they come back, we're going to get some ideas and advice and ways that you may better understand addiction, opioid addiction, and maybe some ideas that can help you save the life of someone you love. See you after the break.
Many teenagers don't understand the dangers and effects of marijuana use. Now it's time for Just the Facts, ma'am. An IQ is a score determined from standardized tests to determine intelligence. An IQ of 100 puts the average person in the 50th percentile of intelligence. Regular marijuana use during teenage years can cause a long-term 8-point drop in IQ. A loss of 8 IQ points drops them to the 29th percentile. For more information, go to drugfreeiowa.org.
After Kylie used coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Hi, I'm Carnell. If you're like me, you spend a lot of time online, streaming shows, downloading files, and Skyping with family. That's why Mediacom recently boosted many of our internet speeds at no extra cost. We call it always faster internet because we're always improving to meet your needs. And when you combine improved speeds with hassle-free Wi-Fi, you get super fast speeds all over the house. So more gets done even faster. The power to make a good thing even better, the power to simplify.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad, and our special guests, Jeffrey Johnston and Aaron Foster. Jeff shared a deeply moving personal experience and suffered the ultimate tragedy and loss of a son, and Aaron has been part of the process of helping parents in the Cedar Valley area deal with some of these challenges. Let's hear what they have to say that may provide you with advice that can help your life. Aaron, you represent ASAC.
Yes.
A highly respected organization. You were extremely helpful.
Yes.
For Jeff's son.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what you do and what parents need to do to get connected
Sure.
if they sense there's a problem.
Sure. You know, one of the things I just kind of want to hit home on is, you know, Jeff made the comment that parents or loved ones in general don't know the process. They don't know where to go. They're in this traumatic experience that they're going through, and everything can kind of come at them at once. And one of the ways that ASAC is helping people is everything's online now. Everything needs to be quick and easy. And ASAC has decided to take a large part of its website and get that information out there. So if you are a loved one, and either you have a loved one who is open to treatment and looking to going, or you're a loved one who the person in need of help isn't quite there yet, we recommend going to the ASAC website and going to the specific piece about getting help, because it walks through the process, knowing step 1, this is what's going to happen. Step 2, this is here's the timeline of what we hope these things will happen for. Because you know, Jeff mentioned he had a lot of questions and he didn't know where to turn to. Luckily, he got someone on the phone that could speak and talk him through some stuff. So we wanted to kind of streamline some of that information and get it out there. So ASAC's website is a great place to go and get that initial first step information.
And you're okay if parents are pretty insistent and pushy to get the information they need?
Yeah, I mean, parents and loved ones need the information. If you need it and you're going through that experience, you need it and you need it right now, which we hope the website, getting that first bit of information, those first questions answered right away, does help with that.
And Jeff, if you could reach into other people's lives and give them advice based on what you went through, what would you tell them?
Well, I think the learning experience for myself, the frustration has been trying to influence somebody that didn't want to be influenced, trying to change human behavior. I'd say the youngest age you could possibly start in getting your children how to deal with adversity, how to handle bad things that happen to them, because instead of self-medicating your problems, and that's what happens with teenagers a lot, they have issues and they go get drunk or they go smoke marijuana to release their, teach them other outlets, whether it's sports, whether it's, doing volunteer work. My youngest son's really into animals, and I'm gonna try to get him to go work for some shelter or do something where he can, that passion and energy that he has to turn into something good. And don't be afraid to ask for help. That's probably the theme here today, and the other talks I've given is even as parents, don't be afraid. I mean, addiction doesn't have any it doesn't discriminate, it doesn't care what color you are, how much money you make, or where you're from. It's out there, it's everywhere. And people can look at our family and think that we never had these problems, and it's been festering for 5 years. And finally on October 4th it came to a head. But there's no way I'm the only family having these problems, it's out there.
Now, if you could go back in time, is it even possible to do anything differently?
No, I have no regrets. That's where I just let go of the guilt. My wife and I did everything we possibly could, and at some point he had to help himself. And I don't beat myself up with regret over that. Are there different roads that maybe he would have went down that we wouldn't have ended up at this final road? I don't know, possibly. But it wasn't by lack of effort. I mean, it wasn't lack of ASAC's effort. It wasn't our effort. I hate to say it is what it is, but it was almost unavoidable, especially the decisions he was making. He kept ratcheting up the problems, and they escalated. But I don't know what else I could have done. That's a good question. I just hope my youngest kids can learn from when things start here, they can end up here pretty quickly.
Well, thank you so very much, because one of the most important things is you're taking your message out to people, you're sharing it, and at least they can see that not only are there good ways to reach out for help, but things that you can actually do that can make a difference. Thank you for watching Surviving Bad. Join us next time on MC22, your local programming leader.